Something about Australia's economy is broken. People are in debt for longer. They are spending far less time with family. It just isn't working for a growing amount of Australians. I think we're in a false economy. I'm going to explain why I think the economy is so false or so fake later on. Over the years I've done this YouTube channel. What I'm seeing is a growing amount of disillusionment amongst normal people, normal Australians, of what the future of Australia looks like, and it's getting worse for that growing amount of people. Since 2022, when down here in Melbourne we were supposed to come out of lockdown, I've been saying on this channel the only thing that's certain is uncertainty, and recent events are moving along to make me more convinced that the uncertainty is increasing. And what that means is it's harder for people to make decisions. I don't know what I was thinking back in 2022. I guess we can look back at the channel and look at some of those things. But what I noticed was more chaos and less disorder. And I don't use chaos lightly. I know maybe I should have used better terminology. However, some of the stuff we saw down here in Melbourne could be described as chaos. I'm speaking about riots and stuff like that. But it wasn't just Victoria. It's the fact of how we are governed in the West as a generalisation. And one of my beliefs is that we are turning more authoritarian in the way the country is run. And I don't know if that's a good idea. In that time, I've also noticed Australia's ability to sell to the world is declining. China doesn't need as much from us anymore as what they did a decade ago. And it's probably a good reason why Australia is cozying up to the Indian government, because India are obviously going to be the next superpower, or at least it looks that way in the coming decades. We've relied too heavily on the stuff we dig out of the ground to get by. It's been our greatest strength, but possibly also our greatest weakness. On top of that, I've noticed normal Australians are getting into more debt for longer. And I guess the sinister thing about that for me is the longer you keep looking at numbers, the more you realize that the longer in debt means the compounding effect of money and wealth goes to someone else and not to average Australians. We can see that in a number of ways, but the rise in wages versus the rise in asset prices tell me over a period of decades that normal people are getting poorer because they have less ability to buy assets. The reason I create this content is to help people make it financially. That's what I've tried to do in my business life. Unfortunately, it has become a lot harder for the average Australian to get by in recent years. I feel it's important for me to tell the truth as I see it, because I feel like there are a lot of things that are not said in mass media and not really spoken about in general. For some reason, some topics are taboo and people feel like they can't talk about it. Well, I kind of feel like this needs to be talked about, because if things keep going the way they're going, the place is going to be worse for all of us. So what I'm going to do in this video is just give you my thoughts on what's happening in the longer term, what's happening right now, and how I'm going about navigating these times in the hope that it will add value to someone. I want to say that just because I think something, it doesn't mean it's right, and none of this is certainly financial advice. It's just to show you guys how I'm thinking about the challenging environment that we're going to experience, I think, in the coming next 10 to 15 years. Our living standards have what could be described as tanked. Real household disposable income. So that means our real income, once inflation is taken account of, has actually fallen faster in Australia than almost anywhere in the OECD. That means we can buy less stuff now with the money that we're making. We've had a housing crash in affordability. Our capital cities are amongst the most unaffordable cities in the world. However, banks are still raking it in. Their profits remain high and they're amongst the most profitable banks in the world. I want to talk about the banking industry for a little bit. I hope that it explains a lot of what's been happening the last decade or so. And that is that banks have only been lending towards property, by and large. It's the majority of where they lend their money to. What's wrong with that? Well, if we don't lend to small business, then we don't get innovation. If we don't get innovation, we don't get new value into the economy. We don't get a demand for an increase in skills without that innovation. I think in a real economy, that's where it comes from. In this fake economy, all of our income growth has come from the public sector competing with the private sector. I feel like what's happening is that it's pushing asset prices further away. It's kind of counterintuitive. Let me go to the banking bit first. If enough lending was done to small business, for example, that drive for innovation, that drive for skills, the drive for competition, that would organically increase wages. You'd have competition amongst the private sector for jobs and skills. The increase of wages from that would help us be able to afford the debt. I'm talking about mortgage debt. I get the feeling that housing prices wouldn't be as much of a problem if the banking industry was forced to do what they always have been. That's to lend to stimulate the economy. That is what I've been talking about, creating innovation, creating competition, and creating skills within the workforce. Instead, what's happened is we've lent pretty much wholly towards mortgages. When money is lent out, it's created in the system. The banks don't have this money in a vault or anything like that. What's happening is this extra money has been created and is going into the economy, and it's going straight towards properties. That's why property prices have been increasing. It doesn't really circulate that as much around the economy as compared to if some of that was getting lent to small businesses, because small businesses, they spend that money to create value, and that money circulates around the economy. As a result of this, what we've seen is a hollowing out of the middle class, in my opinion. Our manufacturing industry was gone years ago, maybe decades ago. It just doesn't exist anymore. And it's no surprise to me that big businesses in the public sector are employing a forever larger amount of the Australian people. This goes to my next point about the middle class getting hollowed out in this country. What's happened is that we don't have middle class jobs anymore like we used to. We don't have a manufacturing industry. That went a long time ago. So what's had to happen is the government has had to step in and employ more people to keep the economy afloat. This has made things worse, in my opinion, and this might be controversial, but I think we need recessions. Government has been good at making sure that recessions don't exist. In a recession, what happens is the bad actors, the bad businesses, the bad employers, they go bankrupt. They're gone. And what happens is all the clients get taken up by the good businesses. Money gets cheap again, debt gets cheap, people can take risks, they can innovate, they can create more value in the economy. And as that happens, the economy reaps the benefits, more people can borrow, more people can get on that train. But as that happens, interest rates should increase. And eventually you get to a point again where people have taken out too much debt and now they cannot repay their debts. You get another crash. That's not what's been happening. We went 27 odd years without a recession, which is basically unheard of until it happened. Government creating jobs in recent times has been an example of the economy getting propped up. An example of government spending creating jobs, a great example is the NDIS. It's 45 odd billion in spending, so that's created a whole bunch of jobs, and actually most of the jobs in the last 3 years since COVID have been created by the public sector. I'm not saying that the people that need NDIS don't deserve it. Clearly they do. But what I'm saying is that government creating jobs just to create a strong economy is not going to last forever. And if this does go on forever, we'll move closer towards socialism, and we'll find out why socialism doesn't work. The other thing I'm worried about is the more authoritarian environment we seem to be living through. Let's talk about the Digital ID Act, because that's in the news currently. What do I want to say about that? This weekend on 60 Minutes, a pedophile ring got exposed. What was happening was that Australians have been paying for extremely indecent acts, let's just put it that way, with young kids in countries like the Philippines and Thailand. Thailand. One of these gentlemen got exposed in a bust for paying to watch these videos. Didn't get 1 day of jail time from it. Suspended sentence. If we're creating this Digital ID Act for the safety of everyone, why are criminals walking free? Bad criminals, pedophiles, people that should be in jail. Why do we have a crime problem in Melbourne? Why did 2 kids the other weekend die in machete attacks? If our government were all about safety, they'd be policing us a lot better. The next piece to this is our banking rules. I don't know if I'm saying that in the right way. However, most of us are aware that it has become increasingly tougher over the last 10 or 15 years to take your money out of the bank. What I'm saying is that the banking industry do have a genuine problem, and they are putting things in place to protect the banking system. Because technology has evolved quite a lot, people can just move their money at the drop of a hat. So if shit hits the fan in the economy, let's just say that, and people move their money out of the banks and they put it to somewhere else, they move it offshore. Maybe something happens, like we get a lot of inflation and people want to store their wealth somewhere else. The banking system is putting things in place so that they control where the capital goes. If there's capital flight, they can stop that from happening very easily. I get that that works in the best interest for the banking system, but it doesn't work for the best interests of the individual if they're seeking to protect their wealth. And the third part to this is things like the Combating Misinformation Bill. Things like stuff I've talked about on this channel plenty of times before. Things where you cannot say that there's something structurally wrong with the banking system, for example. Something like I just said would actually be illegal if this law had been brought in. Never mind that it's factually correct and the banking system does have flaws. It's not perfect. We are getting more authoritarian. I probably spent too long on that, but this is a trend that's going to continue. And as I see the world polarize, these governments are going to get voted in, and they're going to get voted in with more power each time. And when you see more extreme things happening, like political assassinations, for example, you can tell that things are going to escalate further. I don't think everyone's just going to stop and, things are going to get better. Let's go back to the wealth bit. What am I seeing in generational wealth? Well, the debt is a big part of generational wealth. So that has been a lot of what I've commented on in the last few years. If people are in more debt for longer, they're losing compound. If they're in more debt for longer, the banks get the compound or the lender gets the compound. Then obviously there's less wealth, and there's less wealth to pass on to the next generation. That's what I mean when I'm talking about generational wealth. I've been big on saying that people need to take control of their own financial future because the government are not going to be here to save them. Let's take an example of super. So in the last 5 years, super contributions, compulsory employer super contributions have gone from 9.5% to 12%. Compulsory super has been in place since the mid-90s. If the government modelling had been correct, 9.5% would have been enough. Instead, they've basically admitted, in my eyes, that they're completely wrong because they've had to raise it by quite a fair bit. What's that, 25% or something like that? Trusting the government 100% can be problematic, and I believe that people need to take more responsibility when it comes to their future and their family's future. Let's dig in a little bit deeper to debt. The average first home buyer is 37 now. If things keep going, they're going to be 40. We're talking about 40-year home loans now. Like in my industry, I hear the 40-year home loan thing increasingly more over the last 3 or 4 years. In the, I want to say 2001 census, the amount of people that own their homes outright between the ages of 54 and 65 was something like 55%. And in the 2021 census, it was something like 35%. So what that tells me is people are a lot less wealthier, and this is happening over a period of decades. If this has been happening over a period of decades, which it has been, why haven't we been able to see it? Well, part of it is that we have a recency bias. As I said, 27 odd years without a recession. That would create some fake beliefs about the economy and about the world we live in. I think part of the reason people are more and more disengaged, let's say, with the world is that what their expectations of what things were meant to be like have not panned out. I was speaking with a medical professional the other day, spent quite a number of years studying, done that thing, similar age to me, 2 young kids, wife, both working really hard. And he said, Will, I don't think it's meant to be this hard. Like, I should be able to afford good things based on kind of our professions. I think that's a large part to do with a lot of the anger. Anyway, what to do? I'm going to tell you what I've been doing probably for the last 5 years, since the start of 2020. Again, not financial advice. I'm not a financial planner. I'm just telling you what I've been doing. Some of it may be wrong. All of it may be wrong. Or some of it may be right. I'll let the future decide on that. What I want to say first is there's 3 distinct groups that are the most affected by this in Australia. Group number 1 is young Australians. So I'm talking about 20s, early 30s. What's happening is they are coming of age. If you're older, we've all gone through that stage where young adults, we're doing whatever we do with our time. In my case, a lot of socializing and drinking and partying. But we get to an age where we're starting to grow up and we go, all right, well, how do I get a house, or how do I have a family? All of that stuff. And people are running into this problem, right? High house prices. I have one thing to say to you guys, and that is that I feel really sorry for the position that you guys are in. That is because if I was 10 or 15 years younger, I would feel extremely angry about the situation. I wouldn't have had that opportunity to buy a house, to start a business, and to buy investments. I'd be really pissed off with the way things have gone. Nevertheless, you still have a problem. You need to have a home to live in. I get there's all these people saying, just wait, just wait. But if you look at a chart of the housing market over the last 100 years, just waiting maybe not the best policy, let's say. If you're trying to get into the market, government are providing lots of incentives. It's actually one of the things that I believe has pushed more demand in the market. The problem is if you wait, the government incentives do push more demand into the market, and they push house prices even higher. So there are links below if you're interested to see what's happening in that space. And the next group of Australians are probably people around my age, early 40s, late 30s. They have an issue because they're in debt. Maybe they've got a young family. They have to start figuring out, okay, well, we've got to navigate this debt. We've got to get the debt down. Like, we're going to be 30. They're thinking, am I going to be 65 and still in debt? And then they're thinking about, well, life is hectic. Sometimes both are working, mum and dad, or both parents are working, and they're working really hard. And on top of that, they've got to raise a family. They're trying to look ahead. They're trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But they're looking to the next group of people, the third group of people that are mainly involved in this. This is the 50-year-olds to the early 60-year-olds. Their issues aren't so much debt, generally, if they've purchased a property 20 years ago, but they have other issues. They have kids that are living at home and are still semi-dependent, even though they may be adults. There is often very little prospects of the kids moving out anytime soon. They're certainly not going to move out at 18 or 19 like their parents did. So they have to navigate that. On top of that, there's also a lot of uncertainty. They feel they don't have enough in the nest egg. And as I said before, a lot of them still have mortgage debt as well. So they have to contend with, okay, well, how do I create enough wealth, get rid of the debt, create enough wealth for our retirement, but also be able to help our kids out? This is the generational wealth part. So if that's you, I'd like to talk to you. My details are in the links. If you've watched my content enough, I won't try and shove a whole bunch of debt down your throat. It will be a genuine discussion, and quite often it's referral to other experts like financial planners that are qualified to help you with a lot of these things. What have I been doing the last 5 years? So again, not financial advice. Number 1, I've been diversifying. There's a guy called Markowitz, I think it was the 1950s. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for diversification. If you want to dumb it down even further, don't put all your eggs in the one basket. It's been around for a long time because there's an element of truth to it. So how have I been diversifying? So I've been diversifying across asset classes, but also across borders. So let me just explain that. Asset classes to me is property here and overseas, gold and silver, bonds and stocks. If you've got a super fund, most people are investing in bonds and stocks through their super fund. Crypto, been investing in Bitcoin for a while now. That's worked quite well for me, but that's where I've got my stuff, my wealth, I guess, allocated. The crypto is cold storage so I can access that anywhere in the world, buying property elsewhere in the world as well. To me, diversification is a challenge to me because I see safety in diversification. In my mind, I'm always missing something. I always like to say the risks that wipe you out are the ones you don't see. Diversification is something that I think of a lot. The other thing I've been doing is I've been actively working on slashing debt. Or you could look at the other asset class as cash. That's the other one I missed out on. I've been slashing debt, but that means more money in an offset account. The reason I say slash debt is I want to plan for the worst. I obviously will try and hope for the best, but I've obviously got quite a negative view of what's coming. I'll leave it at this, which is quite a dumb statement, but it's very simple and it could be true. If interest rates can decrease for 25 odd years, then they can increase for 25 odd years. I started with nothing. I had no wealth. Now I'm going to work to protect it. So that's all I'll say about slashing debt. Build a backup plan. For me, offshore assets. I really didn't like living through 2 years of lockdowns down here in Melbourne. So I've created backup plans for basically getting out if we get locked down again. Again, hopefully that doesn't happen, but I'm planning for the worst. I want to say one thing on the negativity, and I've fallen a victim of being too negative. It's not that there aren't things to be negative about. No, it's totally the opposite. However, that doesn't help you. It's one of the things that pisses me off about protesters that continually just protest and it doesn't change a thing. What I would say is work hard and buy assets, not financial advice. After all, that has been the way I feel most people have got ahead. I think there's a myth just because a generation of Australians didn't necessarily have to work that hard. They just surfed this wave. I think there's this belief that throughout all of history and all of time, people haven't had to work hard to get ahead. And I think that's wrong. And it's not a very good narrative to feed to yourself because the alternative is complaining all the time and doing nothing about it. That's what I'm doing. I'm working hard and I'm buying assets. I'm thinking long term. I'm focusing on generational wealth. I'm going to be an old dad, hopefully. But that's going to provide a set of economic challenges that I have to deal with, and I have to spend time thinking many decades ahead because these sorts of problems, in my opinion, are not problems you're going to fix within 1, 2, or 3 years. It's going to take decades to get what you want for yourself and for your family. There it is, guys. I hope that helped. Let us know what you think. There's been some opinions there that a lot of people won't agree with. I don't think anyone would have watched this video and agreed with 100% of what I said. So if you disagree, respectfully, leave some comments on where you disagree. Maybe there's some blind spots to my thinking, and after all, if the way we think isn't challenged, then we don't get to a better place. I hope that helped. If you need anything from me, if you'd like to help the channel, you can contact me if you need help with a home loan, or if you just want to have a general chit chat about your finances, I'm here to help. Cheers.